Hello, and welcome to the 12 days of regulatory wrap. It's the most wonderful time of the year, and we'll be taking a festive look back at the biggest compliance news stories from 2025. Cast your minds back to January when the SEC hit 12 firms with a combined $63 million in fines for off-channel communications and record-keeping breaches. 9 investment advisors and 3 broker-dealers failed to maintain and preserve electronic communications because of the use of unapproved communication methods. Most concerningly, at multiple levels of authority, including supervisors and senior managers. Like Rudolph, with his nose so bright, leading Santa's sleigh, the SEC had been leading the pace of record-keeping enforcement since 2021. But 2025's change of administration has seen far fewer enforcement actions coming from the regulator. It will be interesting to see whether this more relaxed pace continues into 2026. Join us next time for more regulatory wrap.
Welcome back to the 12 days of regulatory wrap. March saw the FCA issue an update on its enforcement transparency proposals, otherwise known to the industry as the controversial name and shame. After considerable pushback from the finance space and the UK government, the regulator U-turned on its proposals to name firms that were under investigation, intending to amplify the deterrent impact of investigations. Regulators must walk a fine line between their remit in keeping good faith or seasonal cheer with the industries they oversee. If the FCA had pushed ahead with name and shame, they might have found themselves off many firms' holiday card lists. Join us next time for another regulatory wrap.
Hello, and welcome to the 12 days of regulatory wrap. In February, the CFTC released an enforcement advisory on self-reporting, cooperation, and remediation that explained how the enforcement team would weigh up factors that might mitigate financial penalties for breaking regulatory rules. The CFTC's mitigation credit matrix gives firms a clear set of cooperation benchmarks to work toward, as well as a considerable incentive, a potential 55% reduction in financial penalties for exemplary cooperation. Acting Chair Caroline Pham said this would not only encourage firms to proactively take ownership and ensure accountability, but would also enable the CFTC to do more with less and free up enforcement resources. It leaves us wondering, would proactive self-reporting get Santa Claus to take you off the naughty list? Join us for the next regulatory wrap.
Hello, and welcome to another regulatory wrap. In April, 16 firms were left disappointed after their motion to modify or amend and stay settled orders for off-channel communications violation was denied by the SEC. The firms had argued that settlements reached between the SEC and other organisations in early 2025 gave better terms than their own agreements. The 16 felt they were under unfair financial and logistical burdens to meet ongoing compliance requirements that firms settling more recently were not. The SEC disagreed, outlining that the 16 firms chose to settle their cases early, which carries both inherent risk and potential benefit, avoiding lengthy legal proceedings, but missing later opportunities to negotiate better terms. We've all wrestled with that temptation to start opening our Christmas presents early, but act too soon, and you may end up regretting it. Join us for the next festive regulatory wrap.
Hello, and welcome to Regulatory Wrap. 2025 has been a year of regulators encouraging self-reporting, and in May, the U.S. Department of Justice laid out its new corporate enforcement and voluntary self-disclosure policy. The policy is aimed at incentivizing firms to proactively self-report, with those meeting all the DOJ's requirements around cooperation and timely remediation receiving a full declination of enforcement. Firms that are slower to act or that don't quite tick all these boxes may still qualify for a non-prosecution agreement and up to a 75% reduction in fines. Compliance teams might want to take some inspiration from the elf-on-the-shelf playbook here, as the DOJ emphasized that they are the eyes and the ears of their companies, best placed to see something, report something, and make sure your company can work with the department to stand the best chance of a better outcome. Join us next time for more regulatory wrap.
Welcome to another regulatory wrap. Back in July, the FCA outlined that it will extend existing non-financial misconduct rules to around 37,000 registered non-bank firms to increase consistency of regulation across financial services. This means serious bullying and harassment will qualify as misconduct, and serious substantiated cases of poor personal behaviour will need to be shared through regulatory references so individuals can't avoid consequences by moving from firm to firm. The FCA highlighted strong links between instances of harassment and bullying and other forms of misconduct like market abuse, and that culture where misconduct goes unchallenged can raise questions about a firm's decision-making and risk management. So those engaging in these behaviours better not shout and better not cry. They better be good, because otherwise the FCA enforcement team may be coming to town. Join us next time for another Regulatory Wrap. Welcome back to the 12 Days of Regulatory Wrap. August saw the FCA release results of its survey into communications compliance policy breaches at 11 wholesale banks. The results made for grim reading, with 178 breaches reported over 12 months, 131 of which came from just 3 firms. Worse still, the regulator identified that the largest proportion of breaches, 41%, came from senior staff, the very people expected to lead by example on compliant behaviours. The FCA found that firms have introduced measures including global recording and monitoring systems, personal device bans, and extending surveillance to include emojis, GIFs, voice notes, and video messages to get a handle on communications risk. Clearly, communications compliance is still a regulatory priority. Firms that are yet to make it a focus should consider putting it on the top of their list of New Year's resolutions. Join us next time for another Regulatory Wrap.
Welcome to another Regulatory Wrap. While we used to send holiday cards out to our friends and loved ones, now we're more likely to put up a seasonal social media post, perhaps with a snowman emoji or two. But it's social media that could be landing pharmaceutical firms in hot water with the FDA. Warning letters have been sent out to pharma companies relating to social media content posted by influencers that include false or misleading information. Risk information was not shared in these posts, and audiences were given a misleading impression regarding the safety and effectiveness of a drug. And it's not just influencers. In May, the FDA issued a warning to the CEO of a company who made false or misleading claims on her personal Instagram account. Wise compliance and legal teams will be making sure that marketers, influencers, and senior staff are all singing from the same FDA-approved hymn sheet. Join us again for another Regulatory Wrap.
Welcome to another Regulatory Wrap. September may be an unconventional time for the SEC to release its spring 2025 statement, but the regulator used it as an opportunity to focus on an area everyone's talking about: cryptocurrency. The regulator intends to spend 2026 laying out rules relating to the offer and the sale of crypto assets. This includes the potential expansion of record-keeping rules, including Rule 17A4, to address the application of these rules to crypto assets. This new day for the regulator may see crypto exchanges under the same obligations as traditional financial firms to make and keep records of their business and communications data for the first time. So, if you need a gift idea for someone special who works in crypto, perhaps a secure record-keeping and archiving solution might be a safe bet. Stay tuned for another Regulatory Wrap.
Hello, and welcome to Regulatory Wrap. The last year has seen somewhat of a slowdown of regulatory enforcement activity. Although apparently, FINRA didn't get the memo. Throughout 2025, the regulator has been issuing hefty fines for a range of compliance infractions, including off-channel communication breaches, AML policy failures, and instances where individuals failed to observe high standards of commercial honor. The regulator's primary focus has been on holding individuals to account for breaking rules, fining one former broker $10,000 for sending thousands of off-channel communications, and another for discussing business using his personal mobile, and then deleting messages to try and cover it up. It'll be interesting to see if FINRA keeps up the pace of enforcements through the new year. In the meantime, naughty brokers that wake up with coal in their stockings might well find that it's FINRA who put it there. Join us again for another Regulatory Wrap.
Welcome to another Regulatory Wrap. Let's face it, wherever you're watching from, you probably did some of your holiday shopping on Amazon. But roll back to October, and the company was receiving a very different kind of attention. A domain name system, or DNS error, at Amazon's oldest and biggest data center hub led to Amazon Web Systems Cloud Services users facing significant connectivity issues for nearly 15 hours. It's estimated that the outage impacted more than 2,000 companies and 8.1 million users worldwide across platforms including the London Stock Exchange Group, Coinbase, Snapchat, Fortnite, and Roblox. Coming around a year after millions of Microsoft systems were affected by the CrowdStrike outage, questions are beginning to be asked about whether firms are relying on too few critical third parties to provide vital services, and whether private cloud solutions offer better operational resilience. Join us next time for another Regulatory Wrap. Hello and welcome to our final day of the 12 days of Reg Wrap. 2025 has been a relatively quiet year for the SEC, and based on the regulator's 2026 examination priorities, the new year may follow suit. The Division of Examination's main focuses will include examining whether firms' compliance programs are effective and whether policies and procedures are enforced. This will include looking at newer advisors, as well as ensuring that firms are sticking to regulation best interest. SEC Chair Paul Atkins summarised that examinations are an important component to accomplishing the agency's mission, but should not be a gotcha exercise, and that the priorities will allow firms to prepare to have constructive dialogue with the regulator. Whether the SEC steps up the tempo in 2026 or not, firms cannot afford to get complacent about compliance, because if the examiners do come knocking, they'll be royally Scrooged. Join us next year for another Regulatory Wrap.